Do you ever get the feeling that your life is adrift? You're just floating in a sea of anxiety and indecision, especially when it comes to your financial future. If that's the case, trust me, you are not alone.
But if you're ready to start a new life that lets you answer the phone without fearing that it's another creditor, or you're ready to stop worrying about whether you're going to lose your car or your home or your credit rating, let me introduce you to Our Lady of the Law. Today, Felicia Walker is joining us. So listen, you get a lot of calls about people who are having a really tough time, and talk about some of the calls that you get into your office.
Yes, you do. Well, usually the calls are in response to something, a crisis that happened, or in the nautical scenario, they've already crashed. They've run into the rocks. They're having a hard time. Their wages are being garnished. We filed a couple emergency bankruptcy petitions last week because there were garnishments, and when someone only makes, $300 or $400 a week and they're barely surviving, having 50% of that taken out is a huge crisis. So we have those types of scenarios, or a judgment against them where their bank account's frozen. We had that just this week where someone went to use their debit card, it was denied, they called the bank and it was frozen for thousands of dollars.
And you got money in there.
Right, because they don't realize that once, they get sued and they ignore it. And so they think, well, you can't get blood out of a turnip, so to speak, so they do nothing about it, and not realizing the consequences of that, like a garnishment without notice, like the levy of a bank account, sometimes assets too. So it's a scary thing, and they just don't do anything about it until the crisis happens. It is, because it's so much more difficult to undo that damage, instead of when you realize. I met with a couple yesterday who only had about $30,000 in debt, which normally we wouldn't think that someone would need to file bankruptcy over that, but they had a couple children that were young. They're paying private health insurance because there was a loss of a job, and they had been struggling to pay this for years, and had caught us on the show and came in to find out their options. And they have, like one credit card was $1,900, and they pay $55 a month on that. And when we calculated, it would take them 51 months to pay that back. And they're already struggling to pay $55.
Was it a good portion?
Well, I didn't really calculate that. It was just if they could continue to struggle to make just that one minimum payment. And of course, they had about 10 other cards with small balances like that. And they just thought, well, if we keep working hard, we keep working hard. And I had to sit down and say, okay, what are your children? They weren't able to get, certain health care that wasn't covered, for their children. Or, someone wants to go back to school. There's so many things that people can't do to better themselves because they're so bogged down in trying to make a $55 a month payment. And it's not something that we don't want people to pay their creditors if you can. And sometimes people come in, they have a problem, and, it can be fixed. It can, you can put a $50 more towards the payment every month and get it paid off in a shorter time. So we're not talking about not hunkering down and taking care of it, but once it gets to that point, at what point it becomes too much. Financial problems are one of the leading causes of suicide because people feel like there's no hope.
So when we get to that point of feeling hopeless, more or less, what can we start to do to take care of it and chip away at it?
Well, I think the most important thing is to sit down and analyze your financial situation. People don't want to look at that because it is quite dreadful sometimes to
no
realize
one likes opening those bills and whatnot that come in the mail.
Well, I think you can schedule it. We offer a free consultation to analyze everything, and it's just as simple as making a phone call, driving down to the office in St. Augustine or in Jacksonville. We have 2 locations, and letting us dig through it. Pull a copy of your credit report, say what you owe, what can we do? Is there, can you give up certain assets to be able to pay your credit cards? Could you sell something? It's not always bankruptcy, because people think bankruptcy is just ultimate failure. We've talked about that before, how many famous people and wealthy people have done that to restructure, to move on. And so there's a lot of different things that we just dig in, figure out what you have, what you owe, what can be gotten rid of, IRS debts, and just calculate a plan for that individual person on how to get back on course.
Yeah, that's the thing, is just having the plan, because sometimes I would imagine when you get into that situation, it just feels like it keeps piling on top of you, and you don't know what to do first, and sometimes you just get paralyzed. So coming in and getting the plan. And we also talked about on the show, filing for bankruptcy, a lot of people are very afraid that it's going to ruin your credit, that you're never going to be able to get a car again or get a loan, but you say that that's not necessarily true.
It does stay on your credit report for 7 to 10 years, depending. However, we usually see, first of all, if you have a low credit score, or you're having that much debt, or your debt to income ratios, your credit score is probably already pretty low. So we usually see an increase 75 to 100 points or more. We have a little contest going on privately, of course, nobody knows, about how much your credit is. Right. Or some people stay the same. It doesn't change them at all. Because some people file bankruptcy just to save their home. They've gotten behind on their mortgage payments, or to address a crisis. There's a mortgage modification program that, through HAMP and all of that really works. And so it's just
a lot of options.
There are a lot of options, and why not find out what they are instead of keeping on going on the same path and end up doing it. We've talked about using your 401ks, your retirement, and then you're 59, 60 years old with nothing.
What? Where's my money?
Right.
Now what do I do?
Or the credit cards have it.
Thanks so much for being
Thank
here.
you.
I thank Felicia for her advice, and Emery, Kast, and Walker, of course, for sponsoring this segment.
Remember, the biggest mistake that you can make when facing financial hardships is to do absolutely nothing. The legal team of Emery, Kast, and Walker understands what you're going through, and they're there to help good people in bad times. Just visit their website at www.jackslawyer.com or call them at 904-404-3394 for a free consultation to find if they have any solutions to your problems. They have offices right here